Ladies, are you struggling with an absolute mound of debt and the stress is becoming just unbearable? Are you fighting with your husband over finances and why you never have any money? Welcome to the Rebel Tribe, where we work every day to empower women to see more, do more, and most importantly, to be more. Today, my guest is Coach T with 5 Keys Financial Coaching, and he is here to be at your rescue. He's going to talk about budgeting, debt management, and all the things you need to know to finally whip that debt once and for all. So, welcome, Coach T. How are you?
Hey, I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for being here. I know this is a touchy subject with a lot of women. I've come from that background, so I understand. Most of us are very content to, if we're married, we let our spouses handle the finances. And if we're not, we struggle to figure it out on our own because most of us were never taught how to manage money. So I'm glad you're here to help us with that. Let's get right into it. What do we need to do? And I know that's a very broad question, but if you had to give us 3 things right off the top of your head that we need to be doing differently, what are they?
Oh my goodness. That is definitely a broad topic. And it's different for everybody. Everybody has different struggles. Um, and really, I think the first thing just to know is that you're not alone. Our nonprofit has existed for the last 13 years right here, helping people in not only NWA, but around the world. And the stats are true. 70% of the population are living paycheck to paycheck. And really, this is at all income levels. I'm talking $12 an hour to hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. People are just stressed when it comes to money. And so just know that if you're feeling the pinch, if you're feeling the stress, it's not just because, you may have a particular proclivity to spend, or you're not great at savings, or you really like expensive things. It's just a situation that we find most people in these days. And equal to that stat is 2/3 of the folks, they just don't have a written plan for where their money goes. So, Melodian, let me ask you this. If I say the word budget, what does that bring to mind for you?
A set of rules that I have to follow that I probably don't want to because it's going to make me do without things that I really want. Or
Yes,
yeah, I don't.
exactly.
I'll be the first to admit I don't have a budget.
Well, and like I said, 2/3 of the people, they don't have a written plan. And we actually, a few years ago, we stopped using the word budget. And so what we're financial coaching nonprofit. What we do is we actually sit down, we work with families one-on-one or individuals one-on-one for a period of 8 months to a year to make sure that they're doing the habits they need to win with money. If you've ever read the book Atomic Habits, I love what they say in there. It says, we do not rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. And so one of the things that we do, that we've done, is we stopped using the word budgets. Most people, it can sometimes can even be like a triggering response when you talk about budgets. It comes with, um, control and restriction. And, you often think, well, that means I've got to live on rice and beans until I get out of debt. And so I think the biggest step that you can make forward is to build yourself a spending plan. A spending plan similar to a budget, but with a lot of nuanced differences. One of them being that it's flexible, okay, meaning that it can expand and change with all different kinds of categories. It's livable, meaning that you don't have to put on pause all of the fun things until you get, debt saved up, or paid off, or extra savings in the bank. And it's realistic. Like, it would be unrealistic to say that we could never get a 7 brew coffee, that we could never stop and get some fast food, or even some food to take home when we've had a busy day. That's unrealistic in today's society. It just is. And so a spending plan takes into account all of the realities of life, and it has a little bit of flexibility to it. And so if we're looking for just a few tips, I would say first, get away from the old idea of budgeting, which is where you think ahead, you set some parameters and some numbers, and those numbers box you in to an amount that you can spend on groceries and meals out, right? Um, get away from that mentality. And a really good place to start would just be, how are we spending our money? A spending plan is going to take a look back, and it's going to use the numbers that you're already spending and gets a good grasp on what your lifestyle is currently costing you. Most people are afraid to look, okay, because they know that they're struggling, and if they actually managed their money, they would have to first measure it. Okay, Henry Ford says you can only manage what you measure, right? And so, first step in building a spending plan, take a look back and find out what life is costing. So I've got several other tips and tricks, but let me get your feedback on that. Does that sound like an easy place to start, or does that sound too restrictive?
That sounds perfect. In fact, it was bringing back memories because that is exactly sort of what started me to learn how to take control of my finances. As I was out shopping and I had my daughters with me, and they wanted lunch. And I was like, okay, I know I'm a little tight, but I've got $20 in my wallet. And back then you could feed kids on $20. So I was like, I've got $20 in my wallet. We'll go have lunch. We got up there, we ordered the food. I went to pay. I opened my wallet and I didn't have the money. And I was like, I know I had $20 in here. I spent it and I couldn't even remember what I spent it on. And that's kind of was like, okay, my spending's out of control because I don't even remember what I spent it on. And it was very embarrassing. It really was. Thankfully, the lady behind the counter was quite kind and just paid for our food, but it was horribly embarrassing. So that's when I swore, that's it, I'm done. I'm going to figure out how I did this and how I keep doing this, and we're going to fix it. So yes, that's a very good place to start.
So once you've established like what life is really costing you, it's real simple. You add up all of your expenses, and you take your income that you're depositing, okay, your take home money, and you figure out what your cash flow is. This is the amount of money that's left over at the end of the month, okay? If you're using a lot of credit cards, you may be actually spending more money than you're making, and that would add to your debt. And so a good step would be to think, is there ways that we can decrease our spending or increase our income to make sure that our cash flow is in line with the lifestyle that we're trying to live? And so that's a good first step, is to analyze your lifestyle, see what it's costing you, figure out where your cash flow is. Okay. The next step is, after you look at this, like, am I happy with that? Am I happy with the amount of money that's left over at the end of the month? Do I want to make some changes? If you're living your best life and you've only got a couple $100 left at the end of the month, you might be at a spot where you're like, I just don't want to make any changes. And that's okay. Should still manage your money, because lifestyle creep is a real thing. And so slowly over time, what has a tendency to happen is people will end up spending whatever extra money that they have. So you still want to count that money at the end of the month and see what was actually spent. But if you're not happy with those numbers, the question is the same as before. Like, is there a way to increase the income? Is there a way to reduce the spending? And you want to do it in a positive way. Where are some areas that you can cut? Where are some areas that, you know, a lot of times we'll sit down with clients and we'll be talking with them, and they'll think that they're spending $50 on subscriptions. Okay. But we'll actually analyze the data. We'll go back and we'll look at all the drafts, the automatic withdrawals from your account, and find out that, oh, wait, it's actually $150. Well, then the question is like, are you getting $150 worth of value out of those subscriptions? Like, everything's a subscription now. Like, nothing is just a one-time purchase at all costs, a monthly fee. And so If you're getting all of those values every month, then maybe you don't want to make a cut in that category. But if some of them are kind of old and they've been hanging around for a while and they're not really being used, it's a great way to increase your cash flow right there.
So when we're setting up our budget, how do we, okay, and I know budget's not the right word, when we're setting up our spending plan, how do we figure out where we want to go with it after that? I mean,
Okay. Well, I mean, that's going to be different for everybody. Everyone's going to have different goals. I had a meeting this week with a husband and a wife, and they've only been married for a year and 8 months, and they're looking for her to stay at home during her pregnancy. She's got some complications and things that are there, and some underlying issues, and they just want to make sure that they're financially set to live on one income, but they've never done that before. And so that's their goal, that's their motivation, and they're going to be a lot more intense than somebody who's just wanting to, it'd really be nice if I could, you know, maybe take a better vacation next year. The intensity level is going to vary and the goals are going to vary. And so that's where you got to start. You got to know what you want to do with the extra money. You have to have a plan. And the plan can't just be, I want more money for no particular reason. It has to be a smart goal. And so we use this all the time. There's a great little acronym that if we were talking about setting a goal for ourselves, doesn't matter what it is, the goal doesn't need to be just some sort of wish, hope, and a dream. It actually needs to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Okay. And so a good example, this family, is it specific for them to go on one income? Well, no, that's not really specific. What's specific is we need to replace $40,000 a year in either cutting our spending, okay, or increasing our income, because that's what it's going to take, right? Is it measurable? Well, yes, we can actually track and measure and figure out, like, when do we get to that level? Is it achievable? Well, depends. What are the opportunities that are out there to make this happen? Can he get a second job? Can they come up with a side hustle? Do they have something else that they can do? Is it relevant? Absolutely, it's relevant because they want to have a family. What is the timeliness of this? Well, they're actually thinking by August. And so it's like, okay, so now we have something, we know the amount, we know where it's going, when it's going, we can measure our progress along the way. And they will most likely get to that because they've sat down and they've taken the time to actually have that smart goal. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer in goal setting and taking the time and deciding, like, what do you really want out of your money, and then make your money match that. If you really want to spend it all on fun stuff, your money will match it. If you have some sort of other goal or dream in mind, well, let's make sure that your money matches that.
well, it sounds like this couple's right on the same page, and that's wonderful. But what about, I know there are many women out there that are in a predicament where their ideas of financial planning and their spouse's idea of financial planning greatly differ. How do you handle that?
Yeah. So when it comes to money, there's three big things that everybody needs to work on. We need to work on as individuals, we need to work on as couples. And so one of them are the habits. Okay. So having a monthly meeting is a good habit to have. Okay. Watching our spending on a weekly basis is a good habit to have. The next is our mindset, how we think about money. And we could spend a whole podcast talking on the scarcity versus abundant mindset, how you were raised, the family that you come from, and all those kind of things. But we'll push back that. And then the third thing, when it comes to your finances, is the communication with your spouse. And so oftentimes we see couples that are on different pages when it comes to their family finances. One of the leading causes of divorce is stress in the area of unresolved conflict in the area of finances. And so part of what our nonprofit exists to do is to strengthen the family by strengthening the family finances and helping with the communication. So let me give you some practical steps. Okay. The first one is just to know that people are wired differently, and it's not good or bad. It's just different. And one of the things we've done, we've created a personality profile, a personality test, not super scientific, because this is how we feel about ourselves. But there's actually 6 distinct personalities. There's not just 2. So there's not just a spender and a saver. Everybody always thinks about, well, I'm a spender and they're a saver. And so obviously the saver is better than the spender. That's absolutely not true. Okay. These are distinct personalities, and each one of those have really positive benefits. And so I may have a husband and wife, for example. Let's say they're both, the primary and secondary are the same. Let's say they're savers and planners. They're primary and secondary. They're both savers and planners. And we would think from a financial standpoint, that's got to be gold. That's the best because both of you are on the same page. You're both wired the same way. Here's the problem. This usually what we will see with saver planners is they struggle in the area of being generous, and they struggle in the area of having spontaneity and fun. Okay. And so you have to you have to realize your spouse being wired the same way as you means that you also have the same weaknesses, and you got to make sure and navigate those weaknesses even if you're exactly the same. And so if you both were saver and planners, for example, we would want to set parameters up to make sure that you had a proper planning for being open-handed and generous. Okay. When people need money, like we've got an account set up just for that, and we're feeding that, or we have a generosity fund that goes to different organizations and programs that's set up, that's part of our planning, but not necessarily the first part of our thinking because we're naturally savers. When this couple goes on vacation, we would want to make sure that they have a vacation fund that they had planned on that allows them to live a little bit freer during that 1 week or 2 week vacation, and they're not trying to be so tight. Okay. And so the reason I use that as an example is because it illustrates people being on the same page, also having the same weaknesses, but that when we have the differences, let's say a spender and a saver, they can really balance each other out. Okay. And so if you happen to be married to a particular person that they love taking care of the family finances. Okay. We'll call them the planner. Okay. They love thinking ahead. They love doing the spreadsheets. We'll call them the spreadsheet guru. Okay. Then what role does the other spouse that doesn't really nerd out on that kind of stuff, what role can they play? And there's tons of roles. In fact, we've come up with like 12 different roles in the family finances that are just as important. They just don't have the weightiness that people associate with the person that's actually putting it on a spreadsheet, you know? But they do have the same amount of importance, and we need to applaud that. So you may have somebody that spends a lot of time putting the spreadsheets together, and the spouse that hasn't still needs to advise that role. And so we call that your monthly CFO meeting. Okay. So if you were the CFO of your family, one of the things that you would do is you would run your family like a business, and there may be somebody that's kind of in charge of that, but you want to bring in all the other managers of the household budget to kind of speak into that. And so real good advice is that person that originally put the information together needs to be quiet and present it simply to the other person and invite them in. The person that's not necessarily in control or trying to control the family budget, okay, that person is also going to be really beneficial to shop around and find deals, or maybe even just to organize the bill paying on time. And so lots of different roles that people can play. The important part is that we we get both perspectives involved in the total plan because then we're working together. Melodian, have you ever heard of the Belgian horse?
I have not.
Belgian horses are like these big pack horses. They're like Clydesdales, huge. One Belgian horse can pull 8,000 pounds all by themselves. Okay. But what they did was they actually measured this and they wanted to see what the max was. And for one Belgian horse, they could pull 8,000 pounds. But when you got two Belgian horses, they could pull not 16,000, they could pull 24,000 pounds.
Hmm.
And the reason was is like you're both working together, you actually put more effort in than if you're doing it all by yourself. You just will. You got somebody that's working with you. Here's what they found. If they trained those two Belgian horses for a period of just 6 weeks and made sure that they were yoked equally, in other words, like it was fitted to both of their necks, okay, and things were going like that together, they could pull 32,000 pounds. And so I think this is a good exercise. When you have a couple, and maybe this has been a point of contention or a point of struggle, one of the very first practical steps is just realize that one person is not necessarily better than the other person because of their giftedness. Okay. We actually need both perspectives to balance each other out. Um, and that's just as important. So to know that both of you guys are probably wired different is a good first step.
Now I know that in spite of all of that, there's still some of us out there that are probably in a lot of debt. I know when I retired from the military, I admit when I retired from the military, I moved out here. There's I was a cryptologist, which back in 93 there was just, well, there probably still isn't a lot of market for a cryptologist in Northwest Arkansas. So I took quite a cut in pay. Unfortunately, I did not take quite a cut in spending habits. I was used to having all that money and I just went and lived my life anyway. And I soon found myself in a fair amount of debt. Um, and I used what they call the debt snowball method. I'm sure you know what that is, to get out of it finally, and it worked for me. But I've heard you talk about some other methods besides the debt snowball. So first, would you explain what that debt snowball is for those that don't know, and then the other methods that you've mentioned, so that people can start paying off some of their debt?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, we built a resource on our website. It's just a little video, a little cheesy sub 10-minute video that kind of talks about these. And so it's free out there if you want to go and get this a little bit more specifically. 5keysfinancial.com/debt has got the video that's associated with. But step one is you got to know what your cash flow is. So we got to know how much money we're working with to actually pay off debt. If you don't know how much money's left over and you're just throwing money at the debt, you could be setting yourself up in the future to get into actually some more debt. And we don't want that. And so let me talk before we talk about the debt and the different types of debt repayment. Just step number one, you're managing your funds. You're taking a look back. You're seeing what your lifestyle is. This is going to give you an amount that's left over called cash flow. So we talked about that just a minute ago. But if you don't account for the normal spending of life that don't come around monthly, then you're going to end up running an issue. We would call these setback savings, or old school, maybe you would call it a sinking fund. Okay. A sinking fund would be like every Christmas, you spend a little extra money, right? And back in the day, they used to have a thing called a Christmas club, right? And you could take a little bit of money out of every paycheck and then give yourself a little bonus around November so that you had money that was set aside for Christmas. But we don't do those anymore in normal payroll. And so we would say that the smart thing to do is to set that money aside every single month so you're not stressed come November. If you're going to spend $600 for Christmas, $50 a month gets put away. And it's not just Christmas. We would say that auto repairs, replacing appliances, um, tax on your car that comes around annually, deductibles in January, take into account, once you've measured all of your spending, take into account what you're going to spend on an annual basis, amortize that out on a monthly, and make sure that it's included in that number so that you have a realistic number at the very bottom of how much cash flow you have. So let's say you have $500 in cash flow. You have extra money, $500 that's left over at the end of the month. You have paid all your bills, you've ate all your meals, and you've set money back for the irregular expenses of life. And when I say set back, I literally mean put it in a different account. Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard law of the toothpaste, but if you keep it in the same account, it's going to magically disappear before Christmas gets here. And so here's a big tip from Coach T: set it in a different account. Law of the toothpaste says you buy a tube of tooth, gone 2 weeks, but the second half you can make last forever and squeeze every drop out. Okay. It's the same way with your money. If you leave it all in one big account, it'll go a lot faster than if you separate it out for those midterm savings events that you need to be doing. Once you get a realistic cash flow number, $500 left over, then you want to go and pay off some debts. There's several different ways you can organize a debt elimination plan. And unfortunately, there's not a one size fits all. And a lot of the gurus out there will give you kind of a blanket advice, but it kind of depends on your personality. It depends on your lifestyle and the season of life that you're in, which one really works best for you. But I'll give you all four. Okay. First, let's talk about the debt snowball. That's the one that you used. It is the one that's been most popularized by Dave Ramsey, okay, which is a great radio program helping lots of people get out of debt. The reason that it works is because you're going to organize your debts in order of the smallest amount at the top all the way to the largest amount of debt that you owe at the bottom. And you're going to make the minimum payments on all your debts, except for that small one at the top. You're going to take all your extra cash flow and you're going to throw it at that. So let's say we're making minimum payments on all of that. And then we take that $500 and we throw it at that small debt at the very top. And in a couple of months, that one's paid off because we only owed $1,000. That one gets crossed off the list. We move to the next smallest debt, and all the money that we were paying on the first debt, plus all the money that's extra in our cash flow, now gets thrown at that second debt, so forth and so on. We pay off that second debt, then all the money we were paying on the second and the first, plus that $500 gets thrown at the third debt, and that's the snowball method. The reason it works so well is that snowball is your mental momentum. When you cut up a credit card or you pay off a debt, that gives you a little adrenaline boost that's going to carry you over to make that next debt payment and get that next debt taken care of. It's really good for someone or anybody who has struggled with savings or long-term goals. Okay. And that's really important. If that's you, don't stress. Just know that the snowball method is most likely for you when it comes to paying off debt. The second one's called the avalanche method. Avalanche method, it takes a different approach. That one says, you know what? I am good at savings. I have no problem saving money. I'm good at goal setting and making sure that my goals match what I'm trying to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tackle the debt that has the highest interest payment. So in this particular instance, maybe a student loan comes to the bottom and a credit card comes to the top. Okay. Regardless of how much I owe, I'm trying to save on the interest that it's costing me every month. And so that's what the avalanche method does. It arranges your debts in priority of highest interest first, lowest interest last. And it's the same deal. You throw all your money at the highest interest one. When that one's paid off, you take the money that you were paying on that, plus your extra cash flow, you move it into the next highest interest, so forth and so on. Okay. There's a third method, okay, called the Kiyosaki method or the cash flow method. Okay. This one arranges your debts in order of how much their minimum monthly payment is, and you pay off the highest minimum monthly payment, with the exception of your home. So everybody usually is paying the most on their home when it comes to their debts. And so we're going to take that one off the debt sheet, and we're just going to focus in on this one's costing me a $125 minimum payment. This is costing me a $400 minimum payment. I'm going to pay the $400 one off first, because when I get that free, I got $400 extra dollars to take care of the next one with, plus all my extra cash flow. That one's called the cash flow method. That's number 3. And then there's another one, and this one's called the emotional baggage method. Okay. So I'm sitting down with a young couple last week, and we're talking about their debts. They have a few. They're getting ready to get married, which is awesome because we're going to marry their finances. We're going to talk about that. And so it's a great spot for them to be in. And we're talking about what debts we wanted to attack first. Okay. Do we want to do the snowball, the smallest amount? Do we want to do the highest interest? Do we want to do the cash flow? He's like, no, I really want to pay off the student loans first. I had a bad experience in school. I quit before I got my degree. I really struggled, and just seeing that payment every month is just causing me some issues. Like, I want to get it done. I don't even care about the interest. I don't care. It's like, okay, we're going to attack that one first because it's causing them stress. Same thing if you owed your Aunt Bessie like a little bit of money, and Thanksgiving's coming up and she's not charging you interest or a minimum payment, but man, it'd sure be nice not to owe Aunt Bessie before Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? That's the emotional baggage method. It prioritizes the things that cause the most pain. I reserve that one only for folks that have real issues in the area of a particular debt. And so those are the 4 kinds of debt repayment strategies. I know I've talked about a lot of great things, but just to keep it simple, doing a spending plan every month where you're looking back at your numbers, deciding if that cash flow number is good. You're taking into account all those future expenses that you know are coming, and you're adding that to your monthly spend rate. Even though it technically isn't there, we're putting back money into a separate account just for setback savings. Okay. We're communicating with our spouse on a monthly basis to see if these numbers are okay. And we're inviting them in. We're being a part of the conversation because 2 are better than 1. Then we're agreeing as a family on what debts to attack first. And we're using different methods and styles to do that. Okay. And so that's what I would say from a big picture strategy that we have seen that works best for most of our clients.
When I was trying to pay off my debt, and it was mostly credit card, I admit, I was absolutely inundated with letters from all these companies offering to help me get rid of my debt. Are they legit, or are they just as I never responded to them because they always seemed kind of hokey. Are they legit, or are they as every bit as hokey as I thought they were?
There's definitely some legit companies out there. Usually the ones that we have found that we like working with, they're nonprofits. And so they exist to help people who are in over their head with credit card debts. And what they will do is they will negotiate with the credit card company for lower interest payments, but they're not going to touch the balance. So whatever you owe to the credit card company, if you owe $10,000, you're going to pay the full $10,000 back, but instead of 29%, maybe you pay 10 or 11. And these companies have relationships with the credit card companies to be able to do that. We love those guys and the work that they do out there. Here in NWA, there's one called Credit Counselors of Arkansas, does a great job helping people kind of in that area. But that would be credit counseling. Okay, or debt management. There are debt settlement companies that you have to be very careful on. So let me give you a little PSA on this one. Here's the way debt settlement works from what we've seen. Maybe this isn't that way all the time, but definitely from what we've seen. Debt settlement company will say, hey, you're spending $800 on paying off your debt or paying your minimum payments on your debt. You pay us that $800. Okay. We'll keep collecting your money, but we'll get it paid off a lot faster. And what they do is you pay that company, They don't pay your credit cards or the loans that you have. Those loans then become desperate and start calling you. Okay. You then tell them you're working with one of these companies. The company then takes the phone call for you, okay, and starts talking to these people and say, hey, if you don't want these people to file bankruptcy and you get no dollars, you better settle with us for a particular amount. Okay. And so it's kind of a holding hostage kind of a deal. It's what it seems like to me. Um, and during that time of you not making the payments, that they're not making the payments that makes those companies become desperate, that is hitting your credit. They are calling you. Now that company is going to tell you just ignore their phone calls, and it's like, yeah, then it's going to go to a debt collections thing, and it's really unhealthy. I also don't like the integrity of it from a personal standpoint, of saying like, yeah, we owe you that money, but we just are not gonna pay it. There is a lawful way of going about that. I'm not saying that's unlawful, but there is a lawful way of going about that, and we would call that bankruptcy. And there's different ways about filing bankruptcy, and that's there as a social protection. This way is just a little bit off-putting for most people, because they're not going to be making those payments on a timely basis to make those people desperate. Then there's also like a debt loan. This is where you would go get a loan against something that you own to make sure and pay your debts. And that one can be bad, can be good, kind of depending on the deal. All of these things, all three of these things that are available to folks are there for you to use. You just got to be careful and be very, very cautious. One of the things that I don't like is I just don't like easy fixes. I don't like easy fixes for long-term issues. What we see is people that file bankruptcy one time, they usually get put back into a very similar situation years later, once it kind of all catches up for them. It's the same reason why me going to the gym versus getting some liposuction, like I can go get liposuction, lose 50 pounds tomorrow, but that's not going to help with the eating issues that I have. Okay. And I'm going to be in a very similar boat. So I don't really love quick fixes when it comes to finances. With the exception of it's really nice to have some social safety nets there in the bankruptcy areas. So
Yeah, it would seem to me if you're not paying your bills on top of everything else, you're going to destroy your credit. So I'm
yeah.
not sure that's a
Yeah.
win.
Yeah. Now the nonprofit debt counselors that are out there, they are going to continue to make your payments, and those ones, it may or may not affect your credit, but those ones we would probably recommend.
Well, you gave us a lot of good information, so I'm hopeful that some of us will take it to heart. Do you work by appointments, or if someone listening to this actually wanted to come and talk to you, do they take appointments, or how do they go about?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We have several coaches on staff, and we would love to sit down and work with you. My deal is just reach out to me, give us a call. You can find all our information on 5keysfinancial.com. That's the number 5keysfinancial.com. Comes from there's 5 keys to financial success. Okay. Um, and just talk with us, and we'll see if we can either point you in the right direction, give you some good tools and some tips and things, or if coaching is right for you, we would love to be able to sit down and work. Coaching, you have to have 3 things for coaching to really work. And I always tell people this. And so if you're interested in having someone help to build you a spending plan, get you and your spouse on the same page, design some goals and habits that are set for busy lifestyles, and then hold you accountable to those systems. That's what coaching is all about. But for it to work, you got to have 3 things for coaching to really take root. So number one, got to have finances for financial coaching to work. I tell people this because like, you'd think it'd be, self-explanatory, but you do. You gotta have income. We call that the money M. You gotta have the money. The second thing is you actually do have to have margin, some time in your life for personal development in this area. Okay. And then the last one is you got to have some sort of motivation. You have to have something that says, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I don't want this year to look like the year before. I'm ready to make changes. A lot of people would feel the pain. They have a perceived issue, but a felt need. They just haven't quite got there yet. And so financial coaching is for anybody that wants to make things happen for them and their family. And we're here to help and we're here to serve. And we would love to be able to help you. One of the things that's really interesting about us is we go out and raise funds in the community to make this accessible and affordable to everybody. And so normal coaching would cost $1,500 for a full 8 months of coaching. And we, as a nonprofit, make this sliding scale affordable. Almost everybody's getting an 80% scholarship. And it's amazing the life transformation that we get to see working with families one-on-one.
Well, sounds like I wish you had been here when I was struggling. Fortunately, I read a lot of Dave Ramsey, to be honest. So, but
Uh,
it sounds like
Listen,
you
you're
can.
not alone. When it comes to finances, only 20% is knowledge and 80% is behavior. So you're not alone in that.
Well, it sounds like you can be very helpful. So I will put the link to 5 Keys in the description. So anybody who wants to reach out to Coach T can find him. I highly recommend getting your debts under control. I cannot tell you the relief I felt when the I'll be honest, when the debt collector stopped calling, it was wonderful.
Mm.
When I no longer had to be afraid to answer the phone, it was the most fabulous feeling. So, and it was a combination of a few things, getting out of debt and increasing my income. And he sounds like he can definitely help anyone get out of debt. So I will put all of that information in the description. I thank you for coming and talking to my ladies today. Hopefully they will take some of your advice, and I hope some of them will actually reach out to you so you can help them get back on track and start building a future.
I would love it. Thanks for having me.
Everyone, you guys have a great night. This will be dropping on Friday as always, so watch out and tune in and reach out to Coach T. And the dogs have been quiet right up to the last minute. There they go. Thanks, guys.